everyone. Thanks for joining me. Miss Carol here. We're going to continue today as we are talking about not only the kings and queens of both the kingdoms of Judah and Israel, but now we've brought in a prophet, the prophet of Elijah, a mighty prophet of God. So let's do a little review from last week and see what was happening. Remember that we talked about King Ahab, and the Bible told us that he was more wicked than any of the kings before him. That included his father Omri, who, if you remember, the Bible said was more wicked than any kings before him. So if you can imagine, King Ahab is even more wicked than his wicked father. To make things worse, the Bible tells us that King Ahab married Queen Jezebel, whose father was the king of Sidon, and they were Baal worshipers, and he was a wicked king as well. And so not only is he a wicked king, he's married to a wicked queen, which makes things even worse, doesn't it? So if you remember that King Ahab and Queen Jezebel built a temple on the hill in Samaria, and they put the idol Baal in there, and they bowed down to it. They worshiped that idol, and so did all the Israelites in the northern kingdom. They became Baal worshipers as well. And you know, God was so displeased and so unhappy with them. And so he does send his prophet Elijah to warn them of their wickedness. And Elijah goes to Samaria, to their palace, and he tells them, all right, I'm giving you a message from God, because that's what a prophet does. And God says, because of your wickedness, he is going to shut up the heavens. In other words, it's not going to rain anymore until he says so, because you are so wicked. Now, what would happen if they changed their mind and they repented? Well, it's possible God would change his mind. But do they look like they're thinking about repenting to you? Do they look sorry? No. You know what they look to me? Very angry. In fact, they were very angry. They didn't want to hear what Elijah had to say. And so the Queen Jezebel decides to have Elijah killed. But God rescues Elijah. He tells Elijah, you need to leave here. You need to go. I want you to cross the Jordan. So here he is in Samaria. He says, cross over the Jordan. Go to the Kerith ravine right here. And I want you to stay there where you'll be safe. And so Elijah does that, doesn't he? When he gets to that ravine, it's full of water. It's a brook, so he's able to drink the water there. But God does something very, very special for him. He sends ravens every morning and every evening, and they bring him bread and meat to eat. And he, like I said, he drank the water from the brook, so he was well taken care of. In fact, you know, we talked about that in those days, the kings got to eat meat every day, but regular people, they were too poor to have meat every day. But God is not only providing Elijah with bread and meat every day, but twice a day. So he was actually eating better than a king right now. God was really taking care of his prophet Elijah, wasn't he? That's right. So Elijah stays there. We're not told exactly how long he was there, but I'm sure he was there for several months. So let's, and you know, without any rain, the crops aren't growing. The food is dwindling. There is no food around. So let's just read and see what's going to happen next to God's people. So we read in 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 7. Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. So there's the brook and no water. We can't live without water, right? So then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow to take care of you. All right, so God says, all right, I want you to go to the city of Zarephath. Now let's just see where Zarephath is going to be. Okay, so here is where Elijah is. Here is where King Ahab and Queen Jezebel are. And all the way up here is Zarephath. And also, what do we see there? It's in the region of Zidon. And who is the king there? Queen Jezebel's father. So now he's leaving Israel, headed up to enemy territory where the people there worship the Baal. They worship Baal and they're wicked. But God is sending him up there. God has a reason for that. He thinks he can protect him more up there. God has plans for him. And so Elijah does exactly what God says. So when he gets to the city, or the town of Zarephath, let's keep reading. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there, and she was gathering sticks. All right, let's think again about who a widow is and who is a widow. Well, a widow is someone whose husband has died, and so they're on their own. And back in Bible times, when the husband died, he usually was the one that was able to make the money for the family and buy the food and keep a roof over their heads. And when that husband died, usually the woman didn't have any way of feeding her family. But on top of that, here's this famine where no one has any food. But there is the woman. And let's keep reading. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so that I may have a drink?" And as she was going to get it, he called, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." All right. But here's what the woman says. "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I do not have any bread. I only have a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. Right now, I am gathering a few sticks to take home to start a fire and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat that, and then we will die because that's the last of our food." Wow. So she's in a very, very scary situation, isn't she? She is about to start a fire, make a loaf of bread, which is going to be the last one they have, and then they will have no more food, and she knows they'll starve to death. But Elijah says to her, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." Okay, so let's think about this. Now, this woman is no doubt an idol worshiper, probably worships Baal. I mean, that's where she lives. And she may have heard about God, the true God of the Israelites, but she doesn't know God. She really doesn't know him at all. And now this man that she doesn't know at all is telling her to go and bake her last loaf of bread and give it to him instead of feeding her son and herself with it. Now, maybe there's several reasons. Why do you think she would listen to Elijah? Well, she could think, well, here's the thing. If I bake this bread and we eat it, we're going to starve in a few days anyway, because it's just one loaf of bread and we have no more. So really, what difference is one loaf of bread going to make? Or she could think, well, I don't know this man. He could be tricking me. If I give him my last loaf of bread and he leaves and then we're going to starve. But the truth is, she was going to die anyway, wasn't she? One loaf of bread wasn't going to keep him alive very long. And maybe she just thought, what difference is it going to make? I'll go ahead and I'll bake this bread and give it to him. If we die, we die. We're going to die anyway. But if he's right, if he's telling the truth, and I have oil and flour to last me until it rains, well, that would be wonderful. Then we're not going to die and we're not going to starve. Whatever her reasoning, she took that risk. And the Bible says this: she went away and did as Elijah told her. So whatever her reasoning was, whatever she was thinking, she decides to do as he said. So she goes, she bakes him his loaf of bread. But after he's eating it, you see what happened. Do you see? She has more flour and more oil. And now she can make another loaf of bread. And she can just keep doing that, right? Because that's what Elijah told her. Every time you use up all the oil and the flour, there will be more there. God will give you more. And so there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, just like the word of the Lord that was spoken by Elijah. Now that is truly a miracle, isn't it? So through Elijah, God is able to save this family and keep Elijah alive as well, because God still has plans for Elijah. He's not through with him yet. So let's just keep on reading and see what happens next. Sometime later, the son of the woman, the widow, became ill, and he grew worse and worse. And he finally stopped breathing, and he died. And the woman said to Elijah, "What do you have against me, O man of God, O prophet of God? Did you come so that you could call me a sinner and kill my son?" Now she's thinking, this is something that I've done that's caused my son to die. But she's saying, prophet, is this because I'm guilty of sin? Maybe because she worshiped idols. I don't know. But Elijah says, "Give me your son," he replied. And he took him from her arms, and he carried him to the upper room where he was staying, because their homes were built with flat roofs. And they usually had steps leading up to the roof, because sometimes it would be so hot inside the house at night, they could go up there on the roof and lay down. It would be much cooler. But also, sometimes they were able to build another room up there on top of the roof. Well, obviously, she has a room up there where Elijah has been staying. So he goes outside, goes up the steps, and takes her son to his room where he's been staying. All right, and he laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, "Lord, my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die?" And then Elijah stretched himself out on the boy 3 times. And he cried out to the Lord, Lord, my God, let this boy's life return to him. And the Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. And Elijah picked up the boy, and he carried him down from the room into her house, and he gave him to his mother and said, Look, your son, he is alive. And then the woman said to Elijah, Now I know that you really truly are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. Now I want to tell you something. This is the first time, the very first time that's ever recorded in the Bible about anyone being raised from the dead. This widow, who was not even an Israelite, was given God's supreme blessing, God's gift of life, God's power over death. And the widow from Sidon now absolutely and truly and completely understands and believes that God is the true God, and Elijah is truly a prophet of the Lord, the only true God. And she now believes and has seen for herself that God has power over life and death. And you know, that is something that the people of Israel seem to have forgotten in all of their sinfulness and their worship of idols. Those stone idols, those golden idols, they're not ever going to save them, are they? They could never heal them. They could never save them. They could never do anything for them. But you know, God isn't finished with Elijah. He has plans for him. And let's just read in 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 1. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. Does this mean that Ahab has repented? Is he turned away from his sins? No. I think God is just ready to show his power again and to show his people Israel who really is the true God. So the Bible says it's been 3 years, maybe 3.5 years since God has sent rain. So the people are starving. And let's see what God has planned for Elijah to do by sending him back down there to King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, who no doubt are still trying to kill him. All right, we have a coloring sheet with a widow and her son. And we have a word search, which tells a little bit about all that's going on with us. All right. I hope you have a great week. Remember to be the best you can be. I miss you and I love you. See you next week. Bye-bye.